The production of this video was made possible by donors to the Orchestration Online Patreon initiative. Please consider adding your support to the creation of free educational internet resources by visiting our Patreon page linked below. Hey there, this is your orchestration tutor Thomas Goss, and welcome to the Coda variation for the third movement of Berlioz's Symphonie Fantastique. And as I've mentioned before, this is really Berlioz putting his heart out there for Harriet to either pick up or to just toss aside. He is being his most emotionally honest and heartfelt, and he's being really honest with us too. He's not putting any of this on. He really feels it. And he is also illustrating that he has understood all those lessons that Beethoven taught about how to frame a beautiful pastoral movement and how to be pictorial in music as well. Beethoven studied pictorialism in music, and there was a specialist at the time whose works that he read and he may have studied with. And all of that translates very well to the dawn of the Romantic era here with Berlioz. In our analysis, let's actually start with the horns here. You can see that the strings have taken what led up to here, their wonderful chorale playing, with a F and an A and a C and so on. It's just a lovely, light, lower scored F chord, leading to the F chords here in the horns. It really looks like everybody's playing C's except for this E right in here. But if you look at the actual scoring, what is going on here? This is an F horn. These are three F horns actually. And written C in bass clef sounding up a fourth in old notation to F. So this is a low F being played by our second horn. And then up a fifth from there, we've got C below middle C. And then the next F, down a fifth from this C. And then we've got A below middle C. So it is a beautiful lush chord. Basically, if you think about it in bass clef, it would be, let's just take this bass clef here, it would be F, C, F, A. And it just has a wonderful, rich sound. Notice that Berlioz changes the chord around a little bit as the harmony changes context in the other parts. But it's the same general voicing. It maintains its wonderful background sense right in here. And it's so, in this kind of pianissimo horn pad, has a way of adding harmonic quality that doesn't necessarily interfere with anything else timbrally or texturally. We've got a lovely section right in here where the violins play the theme for our theme and variations, and the winds play the Idee fixed. Da da dum bum 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 bum. And then here the clarinets come in and pick it up. And then the flutes play it again, and then this time the oboe comes in and answers. And while all that's going on, of course, the basics of the theme are repeated, going back and forth between the instruments, violas coming in and sort of picking things up right in here, providing some contrary motion to the clarinet. Just so wonderfully scored. Things join in a little bit more thickly here with the cellos coming in underneath the upper strings. And the violins coalesce into those repeated Cs. Remember those repeated Cs that just pushed and pushed and pushed? Well, there is no wind doubling at the end. It's just the violins, but they end up on these D thirds, relaxing down to E thirds, which are doubled by the flutes. And it's just a wonderful combination of that intense string sound, finally reaching a forte, but becoming tempered by the added sound of the flute, and then relaxing again downwards. Pizzicato coming in here on the cellos, along to these E octaves with a C in the double bass. This is a really wonderful example of the way that violas can work beautifully with double basses, as if they were their own little lower string section, while the cellos do something else. And that is definitely something that comes right from Berlioz. Adding a little bit of support to this are the bassoons. So you've got this E right here being doubled by the lower divisi viola. And then this C right in here is being played by the double bass right in here. And then things relax downwards to this low D flat and F. And the violas can't reach that low, nor does Berlioz want to have the double basses split up divisi here. So he just gives the F note an octave higher to the violas, and it works perfectly. It all just seamlessly comes in together because Berlioz has set up the idea of an octave higher with the upper divisi viola part. Just so clever. Such brilliant scoring. Reaching this point, we return to the violins doubling the winds, written G minor third, but actually an F minor third right here, F and A flat, relaxing down to a G third, written as a C third right here in these B flat clarinets. I love the way that everything seems like it has settled down to this wonderful just F major chord, and the Coda variation is going to wrap things up and just sort of stay in F and maybe have a little bit of a B flat here, maybe even just a slight harmonic trick or something like that. But what does Berlioz do? He just keeps modulating. He keeps exploring the way the music could go in different directions, and then almost effortlessly modulating back to where he can get back to F. Lovely little lower register flute solo reaching all the way up to high C there. And as that's going on, we have the return of the bassoons playing in thirds, E flat thirds right in here, and they are being doubled by cellos and violas with the double basses an octave lower, and then relaxing down to these A flat thirds, which are doubled at least on the A flat here, but with the C in the bass by the cellos themselves doubling the double bass part right in here. It's not necessary to put in this C right in here. It's better just to bring out the A flat and the E flat right in here, as he does with the violas and seconds. And then he pushes the harmony back down, setting things up here with a C seventh chord, the B flat on the bottom, going towards this F 6/3 chord right in here. Just so elegant, so sophisticated, and yet with that sense of wonder at the peace and beauty of the pastoral landscape. We've got these little triplets, perhaps the burbling of a distant bird in the background, and we get into some very, very cool doubling right in here. First violins doubling with Chalumeau register first clarinet. Bum, 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 bum. And some of that motion is taken over here, that rustling motion by the second violins, and the cellos taking over the triplets right in here. Now, very, very cool, we have horns doubling violas. And if the horns can balance with the violas, you get this wonderfully dark sound. And if you don't balance with the violas, then you don't hear the violas. You just hear the horn, and that's not exactly what we want. Notice that Berlioz pushes the violas and then pushes them again. And then by the time he gets to this crescendo, he is probably assuming that the violas are right around maybe mezzo forte, whereas here the first horn is still at around piano. So that way he gets a little bit of balance just written into the dynamics. Meanwhile, second clarinet is playing these little triplets, and then we hear the triplets in the bass right in here, and then the rustling continuing on in the cellos. And that is all just setting up the bum, ba bum, 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 bum. And here he's dovetailing the phrase, starting in the strings, and notice that the string groups are playing towards one another in contrary motion, and they are dovetailing with the winds. And it's just such a powerful idea of the two different sections playing off each other and yet complementing each other harmonically. So it's really driving home that C major chord. Meanwhile, starting on beat 2, then beat 4, then beat 6, and so on, the horns are underlining that C chord. C fifth there. This would be a C down an octave from there. And then this right in here will be the E supplied in the middle of these sounding C fifths. So it really is just a blazing C triad with a C in the bass, supplied by the third horn this time. It's really this big pulsating kind of sound, and you might think that Berlioz is really going to go for it now and end in this blaze of glory on a titanic F major chord. But instead, he's got what built into it? Diminuendo. What the heck? Well, looking at the next screen, we see that he does eventually arrive at his F chord at a piano, not at a fortissimo. And then he goes through some more of his clever little harmonic machinations, making you think you're going anywhere except for F major. And yet at the end, he does end up in F major, a somewhat unsettled F in a 6-3 chord position, right? With the A on the bottom, our mediant down there at the bottom. But he finally brings things around, setting up a cadence with a final little set of triplets from our flute far off in the distance. And he tells the second oboe player, hey, change over to English horn now. Ending with this C right in here and a beautiful tranquil chord. Let's break that apart a little bit. It's a C7th chord resolving once again to a 6-3 chord. And this is so much influenced by Beethoven. It could have been a chord right out of the slow movement of the Ninth Symphony. I can almost imagine bum, 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 da, 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 the exact passage that influenced this chord. B flat on the bottom there, then an E in both divisi parts, G and a C. So essentially the voicing of the 7th at the bottom and a 6-3 chord above. We've got that B flat doubled by the bassoons right in here. And then above that, complementing some of the string pitches, we've got C octaves, right? And then the same C is being doubled by the same bottom C being doubled by the third horn. This written E here is coming in underneath this G. So it has this beautiful tranquil sound and so well balanced. Then resolving to an F6-3 chord with the A in the bass once again. These little arpeggios floating downwards. Very cool how it goes F, C, A, F, and then right on this A, the oboe comes in above it, and then arpeggios downwards over it, headed for the same F. And we also have harmonic motion starting in here with the clarinets. As the flute gets to this C right in here, the second clarinet plays sounding F, then sounding C, sounding A, and at this point, the first clarinet comes in playing the A below this C right in here, so all nicely harmonized. And we have that ba-ba-bum idea coming back, the little dotted idea, both in the bassoons and in the divisi violas, playing octaves, dipping downwards from F down to A. And then we've got the first two horns playing an A third going down to an F third. And Meanwhile, while all this is playing, these nice held tones right in here, and the little plucks from the violins, we've got the pizzicato cello going back and forth in this cool little pattern right in here. And this is setting up the outro. You would think that things would end on a beautiful F chord at the end, but such is not our fate. Berlioz wants to return to the reality of the situation of him sitting in this field, listening to the shepherd piping, and wondering what he's going to do with his life, right? He has revealed his heart to Harriet, and now he's got to tell her, but I'm still alone. And how is he going to do that? We'll find out in the second half of this lecture. But for now, listen to that beautiful Beethoven-like scoring, and yet the way that Berlioz makes it his own, in the way that he carries it forwards. And this lovely chord right in here, with the winds as all the other rhythmic elements pitch in right in here, and these figures and so on. Then, of course, the way that this passage modulates and modulates and modulates and still just ends up on an F6-3 chord. The little chirping motive that we see in the triplets, introduced in strange little places like the flute right in here, the cellos answering, the clarinets, and then the double basses. And then how this pushes towards what you might think would be an apotheosis, but then lets go almost immediately. And then the lovely doubling of the clarinets with the lower violins. One might even ask the violins to play Sol G right in here, so they get just that wonderfully burnished kind of sound blending with the clarinet sound played across its chalumeau register and throat tones. And then my favorite part right in here, first horn blending together with the violas. And the more that this blends right in here, the more wonderfully rich and dark it will sound. But everything starting here at the beginning of this coda variation with this lovely pad here in the horns and the idée fixe playing in counterpoint with the main theme, and the intensity of those octaves leading to this whole idea of the thirds relaxing downwards, doubled in different groups of instruments, especially the way that the violas team up with the double basses right in here alongside the bassoons. That just kills me every time. Also, something similar happening right in here with the bassoons working with the lower strings. Just such great scoring. Enjoy all of that, and I will see you for the very last screen of this last lecture on the third movement of Berlioz's Symphonie Fantastique. And now, as I mentioned before, Berlioz has turned off his plea to Harriet, and he's just going to leave her with this final word, and that is, I'm alone out here, right? I am the observer listening to the piper playing, and that piper has also lost his companion. There is no echoing part of imitation with an offstage oboe. That's it. He's just playing the same thing that he did before, pretty much note for note, but there is no answering. What answers him? Not a charming, distant companion, but thunderclouds on the horizon. There really isn't a whole lot new to say about this English horn part. It pretty much does what it did before, leaving out those little parts where it accompanied the imitation from the offstage oboe. And then it sort of dies away right at the end with a couple of last notes. So instead of focusing on that, which the audience might as this movement came to a close, let's look at those timpani instead. 4 different players, and they are supposed to be placed at opposite sides of the stage. So the listener might hear rumbling coming from one side and then completing coming out of the other side, or coming from both sides. And there's even the sense of marching back and forth between the different sides of the stage in the next movement, which is the big march movement. Soft beaters. Berlioz, even though he's assigned these 4 discrete pitches, A flat, B flat, F, and C, he really intends them to be more nebulous. He wants the springy sound, the really resonant and radiant sound of timpani, not of bass drums. But he doesn't really want you to focus on any particular harmonic reference for the English horn. These are more intended to be rumblings. Berlioz was assuming, and he was right, that if you put these pitches in fairly close proximity to one another, that the audience wouldn't really be able to pick out any particular chord. And when you think about it, you've got A flat, C, and B flat really in close proximity to one another, and then you've got the F on top. So it doesn't really spell out anything. You could think of it as being an F minor 6/3 chord, add 4, or add 11, however you wanted to work it out harmonically. But really, it doesn't add a whole lot. You might sort of be able to make out some of these Fs in the context of the key of the piece, but it doesn't really provide much harmonic relevance. Having said that, I would say it's a good thing that they are tuned that way and not in just any old arbitrary key, because I think that that would be a mistake too. So our lonely shepherd is piping away, and there is no answer from his buddy a couple of fields over. Instead, he hears the thunder rumbling in the distance. And it's just a little bit at first. Continues on with his little tune, just slightly uncertain, going to a minor mode now. And things get very rumbly, and then sort of die off with a couple little boom booms. Then he continues on his little theme. Once again, there's no answer. There's just more thunder coming. So he decides he's going to finish this up, and he's just answered with more little bits of thunder. So it is time to get his flock together and get out of that field and take them back to the pen and get himself out of the weather that's on its way. And things end on an obligatory F chord, very simply scored. C going to A, and then finally ending up on an F, along with this long-sounding C below middle C from the second horn player. And it's meant to continue on past this last little pulse from the strings. And what happens after this beautiful pastoral moment? Well, for the artist, he takes an overdose on opium and has a really, really bad night. But we will analyze that in the next lecture. For now, have a listen to the music that goes along with the screen. Very simple stuff. The English horn playing its little solo with no answer from an offstage oboe, answered by these rolls from the timpani, meant to symbolize thunder. And as he continues on, the thunder gets worse. And he continues on, but he still is getting no answer, and he doesn't provide any kind of counterpoint of a melody to the nothing that's out there. Things rumble again, and he sort of finishes on a hopeful note, answered by the strings, just to wrap things up and to not end right here. Have fun with all of that, and just have to say once again what fun it is to bring you a movement with this much beauty in it. It wasn't necessarily the most ingeniously scored movement of this entire piece, but there was a lot of genius in it. Berlioz wasn't showing off so much as he was showing himself, revealing that part of himself which he considered intensely personal. And I really respect that honesty for whatever his very weird quirks and personal prejudices and everything else, which make people sort of think of him today as sort of like, ew, wow, hope my son doesn't turn out that way after giving him some piano lessons kind of vibe. Instead, I think we can see here that he was a very sincere person, a very sincere artist, and he really felt something that was overwhelming him at the time. And this is his non-extravagant expression of that overwhelming attraction that he felt to Harriet Smithson. And I hope she understood that when she heard it. Of course, their time had already passed by the time she heard his piece for the first time. But that's another story. So enjoy this screen, and I will see you soon for the first lecture of Movement 4, March to the Gallows.